little bit different if you trust preseason. And I love George Karlaftis. There's a lot to talk about, not a lot of time to talk about it. So let's talk some Chiefs, guys. Welcome to Keys in the Kingdom on RGR Football with me, Seth Kaiser, the Chief in the North. This is our new and improved, I don't know, it's something, every week segment that we are going to be doing here on RGR Football, where we're going to talk about the keys to the kingdom. We're going to be talking about some of the major plot lines that I think are going to be covered throughout the week that are kind of important to what the Chiefs are doing moving forward based on what we saw in their last game. And so we're going to swing right into it. We're going to be doing this every week, Monday or Tuesday, depending on when the Chiefs play. Hopefully you'll find us here. You'll join us every week. If you hit the like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, that's helpful. Ryan will tell you more. He's an actual professional. But I have things to talk about. And there's actual football. And let's just celebrate that, shall we? This is just one of the best things that could possibly happen to us in that we can actually look at actual film now, figure out what's going to be happening from here on out. I couldn't be more excited. The Chiefs actually played real football, well, preseason football, but something resembling real football. And that's close enough for me. So first things first, the Chiefs, they lost to the Bears, I think. I couldn't tell you the final score if my life depended on it because, as we talked about last week, the final score in a preseason game doesn't really matter. But there are things that you can take from a preseason game, even preseason week 1. And I'm going to try to take a few of those things today because that's really what's most important is what you can extrapolate moving forward with everything that went on. So I've got a whole list. This is going to be so great. I'm so excited to be back to doing this. It reminds me of just being back on the podcast years ago where I just had a list of things to go through and not much time to go through it. Now you get to watch me do it, which is, well, a little bit intimidating, but I've got my buy drink. Hey, buy drink, call me up, and I'm good to go. So there's a couple things I want to talk about first, starting with the first team for the Chiefs, the first team Chiefs offense. They rolled down the field and scored. No one's surprised there. They still look good. Something that caught my eye and something that I might be writing about this week, which again, is going to be kind of a preview piece for everything that we are going to be looking at this week and that I think a lot of people might be looking at. And this is something that caught my eye, and it also caught the eye of Nate Tice of The Athletic, who does a great job here. If you look at what the Chiefs did with their first team on offense, not only did they move the ball well, we all celebrate, it was awesome, that's wonderful, but they also did something else that I thought was kind of interesting. Now, what can you take away from how you line up in preseason? I have no idea, but one thing that the Chiefs did quite a bit is they were lining up under center, they were running with play action, they were running with just a couple of receivers, they were running with a fullback, and by running, I don't mean literally running the ball. I mean, that's how they were running their offense. And it's just something that I thought was a little bit interesting as a takeaway in that the Chiefs, we talked about this a lot last year, they really found somewhat of the limits of what they could do in terms of spreading the field, throwing the ball all over the yard. And if teams try to put a ceiling on that, what's the counter? Well, one thing the Chiefs did last year is they started to take more snaps under center and a little more traditional play action, not necessarily tightening, with more tight ends, more fullbacks, that sort of things, but kind of trying to condense things a little bit and forcing teams to come up to the line of scrimmage. If the first game of preseason, the first drive of preseason is any indicator of that, which it may not be, it may just be Andy Reid running things as vanilla as humanly possible, that may be something that the Chiefs are looking at as well. And so that's something to just keep an eye at moving forward. And I'm glad to see that I wasn't the only one who noticed that. Something else to notice with the first team that I thought was just fun, if not necessarily news to any of you good people, is the fact that Patrick Mahomes is still a wizard. One of my favorite plays of the game to convert on a third down. Patrick Mahomes dropped back and he did his thing here. One of my favorite things that he does, and I'm just going to watch this over and over because this is amazing. And I love the fact, by the way, I'm going to be abusing the fact that you can now watch my screen occasionally. One of my favorite things that Patrick Mahomes does is he lures defenders away from passing lanes. So you see Mahomes going through his read here. It's kind of interesting because I was told that, he doesn't really go through his read, even though here it looks like he starts off left, then he moves all the way to the right. And now you notice he sees 53 here, which I'm pointing there when I should be pointing right here. He sees 53 in the throwing lane. He knows that he doesn't quite have the look that he wants because he knows MVS is could come open right there. So what does he do? He starts to scramble. Oh, he's taking off this direction. He knows that's going to force 53 to come up on him. The whole time, he knew he was coming back to MVS here. How do you know that, Seth? Because I've watched and charted every single snap that Patrick Mahomes has taken in his career, and I recognize when he's doing this sort of thing. What I really love here is that MVS keeps moving as well to get open on a broken play, third down conversion, nice and easy. Couldn't love it more. It's something to keep an eye out for, not just the fact that MVS and Mahomes seem to have a good connection there. Not just the fact that Patrick Mahomes seems to still be Patrick Mahomes, thank goodness, but just the entirety of the way that looked, the smoothness of MVS continuing to work. Remember, he's going to be more of a deep threat. He's the guy that has kind of just a certain niche in the offense, but seeing him post up a little bit there and seeing Patrick Mahomes take advantage of the fact that he can post up, he does have size, and Mahomes utilizing his ability to get MVS open in a situation that he normally wouldn't. Those are all really important things and things that I'm going to be again, they're just these little miniature takeaways. And that's something that I find really, really interesting and hopeful that MVS's role in the offense can expand just a little bit. Of course, one of the biggest things that I've already written about this week that if you haven't, you could subscribe to the Chief of the North newsletter to read about it, is George Karlaftis, who made some, he was kind of the headliner of the preseason game. Well, and why? Well, because of moments like this. So what you see here is the article I wrote about him on the Chief of the North newsletter talking about Karlaftis. He picked up a sack on a play that was more motor and coverage than anything else, but he did demonstrate something here that I really found interesting that I actually wrote about. I charted every snap of his, and I found some pretty interesting things. Now, look, you are getting past the paywall of the Chief of the North newsletter. That's the kind of thing that you're going to get occasionally as a benefit of watching these keys to the kingdom. And you're going to occasionally get to see maybe past the paywall, or you could just subscribe to the Chief of the North newsletter. Your call, either way. So I charted every single play by Karlaftis. And one thing, so pass rush wins, pass rush losses, run defense wins, run defense losses, neutral plays, pressure hits, sacks. Something worth noting, in limited action, he had 2 pressures, a quarterback hit, and a sack. That's great. The competition level varies in the preseason, but the thing that I really wanted people to notice with him, first of all, I mean, yes, he played with the type of power that you want to see. One of the early drives against the Bears starting unit, he bullied the left tackle backwards into Justin Fields' lap. Utilizing power is how he won primarily in college. But it wasn't just that. And it was a great play. He laid a nice hit, utilizing the methodology that Karlaftis generally uses, as he'll either long arm or try to bull rush the tackle into creating an inside rush lane for himself, and then he moves inside. You see a similar attempt at a move right here where he did force a hold that went uncalled, unfortunately, and then he forced a bit of a double team. Fields was able to scramble out, made a nice play. But the big thing I wanted to talk about with George Karlaftis that I thought was interesting, look at how he moves on this sack right here over and over. I've been looking at this like Zapruder film lately because he has to turn a corner here to get around the tackle. Even though it's not a traditional turning the corner on the edge or anything like that, he does have to turn a corner. And he had another snap similar to that later on where he got a hit on the quarterback. Now he doesn't. One of my Twitter followers pointed this out, and he was absolutely right. I love the way he framed it. He doesn't get his hands clear right here. You see how he doesn't quite finish off that rip or swat down in order to get that tackle's hands completely off him. So he's dragged back for just a moment. So he could speed up this process by about, a half second or so. But here's where I'm interested. This right here. And again, it's blurry. It's like Zapruder film, but this is what has me interested in George Karlaftis, because something he didn't show in college was bend. And that's something that he showed several times in this game. And it's something to keep an eye on moving forward because it's something that was supposed to limit his ceiling as a pass rusher. He's a power guy. He wins despite his lack of bend because of his other good traits, because of his power, because of his explosiveness, because of his ability to layer moves together. But if he can add just a little bit of bend to that, that's going to be huge moving forward. It's something I've already written about. You can go check it out on the Chief of the North newsletter. A few other things that I think, and I can tell Ryan is such a genius. When I told him this would be a 15-minute thing, he was like, yeah, sure it will, Seth. And so a couple other things to keep an eye out moving forward for coverage that you're going to see for the rest of the week. Sky Moore, everyone's going to be talking about him. I perfectly understand why. Probably his best play here. If you the play that everyone was talking about was his toe drag swag. One of the best plays of the game for him. Great sideline catch. That's awesome. Preseason highlights are great. However, what I'm going to have coming up on him, probably by the time you're watching this later on Monday, I'm going to be looking at every snap that he ran just to kind of figure out where he won, where he didn't win, and what he can kind of do moving forward. Something worth noting with Moore, for as much as he's getting a little bit of hype today, he did see a lot of snaps kind of moving forward in the game, which is at least somewhat indicative to me that I don't know how much of the primary first team offense he's going to see. We're going to learn more moving forward, but it's worth noting that the first team offense, it was Juju Smith-Schuster, it was MVS, and it was McCole Hardman. We'll see if that continues that way moving forward, but that's something to keep an eye on. And like I said, I'll be writing about Sky Moore later in the week. A couple other things that I really found interesting in terms of, this is one of the things you can learn with the first preseason game is where the snaps go. Trent McDuffie, Josh Williams got snaps with the first team. Now, Rashad Fenton is still working his way back to health, so we're going to see what happens there. But it's at least worth noting that two rookies were getting playing time early, and from my eye, and I want to write about both of them later this week, looked like they acquitted themselves pretty well. Josh Williams gave up a big play down the right sideline, but that was more just a great throw and catch. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about that. He had the coverage. I'm excited to see those guys moving forward. When you look at some of the other rookie guys that we're expecting to contribute, Leo Chanel played deep into the game and did not take any first-team snaps that I was aware of. Maybe I missed one at the SAM, but I don't think I did. Generally speaking, I think Leo Chanel is probably not going to have the impact people are hoping in year one. And the snaps that he's getting, at least early in preseason, would seem to be indicative of that. He needs to kind of work through some things in terms of getting used to the speed of the game, getting used to being in coverage, some of the things that they're looking for from a Sam. His run fits look good. He is a guy who can definitely move the needle there. So if it were me, I would figure out a way to get him on the field because of the physicality that he adds. But Spagnuolo has generally seemed reluctant to do that with young guys unless he thinks he can trust them to do the whole thing. Brian Cook saw snaps deeper into the game as well. He's a guy that they're hoping can win the third safety spot. There was a lot of TBD with him. He made a few plays that I found interesting. He's another guy I'm hoping to get to reviewing every snap later this week, but he didn't have a splashy impact or anything like that. He made a great hit on special teams, but again, he might be a guy that needs to more work his way into the rotation. We'll learn a lot more about him moving forward. If he's a guy that I've got to wait for 1 week, well, that's okay. One final thing I wanted to share as I get going here is that in case you didn't think that he was, in case you were a little bit concerned, well, you guys, but what if Chris Jones isn't great anymore? Well, one thing we found out very quickly from this game, Chris Jones, still great at football. Not a great rep from the right guard here, but Chris Jones is just one of my favorite players to watch. The way he utilizes his hands to just absolutely destroy opposing guards is one of my very favorite things. The way he's able to catch wrists so well, and then he controls he controls the right arm of the guard by catching the wrist, and then he gets his right hand on the guard's left bicep to keep him from reaching out there. It's just great stuff. Chris Jones, still a fantastic football player. In case you were worried, I personally wasn't, but Chris Jones, I try to point out when he's great every chance I can, because I'm not sure I've ever seen an elite player get more flack than him. Looking ahead to other storylines that I think people are going to be talking about this week. Like I said, I'm going to be looking at Trent McDuffie, looking at every snap of his to see kind of the things that he did. I do think it's important to figure out how he acquitted himself in man and zone, even in limited snaps. I am also going to try to look at Orlando Brown snaps on a very limited basis. I'm not going to chart them. There wasn't a high enough sample size to do that. But I want to take a look at Brown and Frank Clark to see if their new physiques resulted in any kind of different movement out there on the field, one way or another. Both of them have, in very different ways, something to prove this year. Brown has something to prove that he can go from good to really good or excellent or great, whereas Frank Clark needs to show that he can bounce back from maybe the worst year of his career and a couple of relatively down years for him, pretty down years for him, and be an impact pass rusher this year. Things that I would be really watching closely this week if I were you in terms of the rest of the coverage that you're going to see. Isaiah Pacheco, you notice I haven't mentioned him yet. He did get snaps with the first team almost exclusively. He did play a few snaps with the second team. It looks like he's in and that Jones is out. At least based on the snaps that we're seeing and the fact that Jones gave up a horrific sack in pass protection. Those are guys you're going to see getting a lot of coverage this week. I'm going to wait until next week to see a little more Pacheco because honestly, we didn't see that much from him. But it was interesting to see him right after Clyde, who got tons of snaps with the first team, be the first guy up. In terms of everything else you're going to see this week, I personally am most excited to look in week 2 as we start to move forward towards that to see Carlos Dunlap get a few more snaps, see what the pass rush as a whole looks like together, and see if in preseason week 2 we see a little bit of similarities in terms of how the offense runs itself. Were they just running super vanilla for preseason? Are they going to be running a little more under center this year? Are they trying to figure out a few more condensed formations, ways to kind of force teams to, again, come up, stop trying to cheat towards the deep ball, and then open things up for when the Chiefs choose to open things up? These are just some of the keys to the kingdom this week. Every week we're going to be here. I'm going to try to condense as much as possible into an itty-bitty space. I appreciate you guys watching. I will be seeing you later this week. On Wednesday, I'll be tweeting out for the Chief in the North weekly mailbag, which I'll be doing here. You'll be able to see here on Thursday. So make sure to keep an eye out for that tweet on Wednesday to get your mailbag questions in, and I will answer them here. And then I'll be back here on Monday. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. It is a great week to be a Chiefs fan.